and public is very blurred, and the private is often openly accessible, especially the private space of poor people, and there are millions of poor people living in Bombay, and you just walk around and can look into their homes, and they have no and they have no problem with this, and so this negotiation and interferences between private and public, I think, also constitutes certain ways of living and forming the interior or the exterior. So this is for me an interesting question. What are the differences, cultural differences also here between Germany and, let's say, here in Bombay as an extreme place?
But one maybe has to add that the big difference between Europe and probably all of the rest of the world, because the show traveled nearly through all the other continents, is that in Europe we actually have public spaces which is also used by public. And people go in parks and sit on the streets and relax and have conversations. And in these like big metropoles like Mumbai or Jakarta or Manila or where else the show have been, yeah, Hanoi, etc., people rush through the streets. Yeah, they go in a taxi, they go quickly there. You don't have a public conversation in public space. This is something very special in Europe, just to add. And Mr. Welde is totally right that the German housing or the German houses or the German cities, they have a special, they stresses this privacy on the one hand, I would say. But for example, in the Netherlands, the architecture, I mean, you're an architectural expert, you know it, it's totally different. Or Claus, he lived in Amsterdam. It's much more open. It's much more also open to the public. But I think the public space, I mean, we have art in public space. We have gardens. We have cafes. And this is something which we are very proud of, because this has also to do with the beginning of the 20th century, like the Passage in France, yeah, Benjamin has written about it, and so on. And this is something nowadays also, I want to come back to 2016, because of terrorism has changed so much. And we are not, Germany is not so much gated away, but the countries we have traveled and the cities we saw, you have these gated areas, yeah, and they are, it's a total exclusion. Yes, and then you have the street life, but the street life, of course, it's open. You can also see in these houses, but you don't have, you don't go in these houses. I mean, there is a border. Yeah, you can see probably the inside, but still there's a border also of respect. You just don't walk through the people's houses. Also, yeah. And we went, for example, to this Banganga, where you have the temples. But 2 were open, the rest was closed, so even churches are not open. And this is something also we have in Europe, you know, you can go in every religious place in a way, in Protestant churches, Catholic churches, yeah, without paying, more or less, yeah. In Germany you don't have to pay. If you go in Italy it's a little bit different. So what I just wanted to point out is that because it's all in a big change, again, I want to point this out, that the view of individuals, the view of artists, and the special, and it can be only a very like small view on this world, and is so, needs to have respect from the society, and needs to have a place where it can be shown, where you can experience it, where you can discuss it. And so I think it's more necessary than ever. Even we think we have so many museums and places to go, and everybody knows about everything. Yeah.
Yes, like I also want to add, I mean, in my sculpture, you can experience sort of private and public life as an art experience, and also as a sociologic experience, which the moment in Europe is the space to make this kind of experience, and which is in danger now at the moment. But also Shilpa's experience is in danger because watching yourself while you are watching yourself is also something you need time, and also a secure space where you can do this kind of research. So in a way that's not so, it's not so far away. Because if you are in a hurry, or if you don't have the time to think about yourself and where you stand and where the others are standing, then it's not really possible to think about cultural standards or making art or psychological surroundings which brings you in the situation to fabricate or to make art, I would say. So for me it's not so far away what we are showing together in this exhibition, which was one for me of the main positive experiences, that it's not so far away.
Well, I don't know about many other cities, but to say about Bombay, and I can cheekily say you didn't walk Bombay with me, so you've not seen the Bombay in many ways. But it's, in fact, in this very room, I did a lecture during the Parsi show here, which was on the question of the relationship of the private and public in various housing formats that have largely dominated the city, at least up to the 80s, which includes the apartments that came up, either the developer apartments or the sort of the MIDC, etc., those kind of apartments housing, that there are layers of publicness. So there are many neighborhoods that if you walk, and that's one of my definition of the neighborhood, that the interior exists very much in the public. But that street is such that you can zoom by it and not realize the public till you sort of have a sense, or you are a person who is a resident there and you know how the street sort of operates. So there are certain locations which are the chawls and the bags where the cul-de-sac becomes the sort of the public and the private kind of a shared space. But very, very many areas, the sort of the main street, which is not the fast moving street, but the second rung of moving street, actually operates like a newspaper reading library, operates, you have to see it how it behaves during festivals, for shared meals, at the same time people hanging out on the street because that's the public space. So this sort of the definition of the public, which is sort of agoratic in some sense, which comes from that sense of the agora, does not operate in the same way, but it's a different sense of the public. So actually, till a fairly, I can say, up to the middle class, it's not only with sort of the poor, but to a middle class, you have this sense of shared space, which includes apartment housing in Bombay. So the sensibility of this shaping of the private and public is extremely different. And I think right now what is happening is that historically, even within India, the way we have understood our public and private is sort of slowly beginning to get questioned. A lot of my work is about asking questions about where does the public end and where does the private begin, because it doesn't operate in those classic definitions.
I mean, the conversation is differing in different directions, but just to again add to what Kaiwan was saying is the main difference between understanding the idea of public spaces between the West and the East, especially when it comes into the Indian context, is there is a certain claim that you have to make to a given space to make it public. And you can see these kind of claims that are made through, I would say, interventions that are happening. And when it comes to understanding what, again, going back to the question of what is art in a public space, necessarily doesn't need to come from the idea of the language of art, but rather how do you underline something as a visual, where you don't necessarily need an artist as the protagonist of the story. It can be anyone who has done that. And if you look out for those kind of corners all around the city, and there are many, the problematics here is that we have started defining things in a much more descriptive manner, and we have started tagging down things. And I think at the beginning of the discussion, the questions that we were trying to understand, that what is art and what is design, and when does, like also Kaiwan mentioned, and this is a conversation that we also started having in the morning over the mails, that when, when does the object become an artwork? So I feel somewhere there is also this, one also has to look back at how education is playing a vital role within creating this kind of a system. That when you get into an art school or when you get into a design school, Kaiwan was part of a design school. I mean, there are experiences that we've had on that and before. And what do these education systems teach you? And that's exactly what has been performed once you get out of the academical setup. And somewhere the academical setup also starts defining things. And why again and again we come back to the idea of Bauhaus, that what Bauhaus did was to blur those identities in a certain way. The irony is that the art schools follow a foundation course which is based on the Bauhaus system. But rather than liberating your thinking mannerism, it kind of brings you to a situation where you start defining everything as a pattern. Whereas the aspect of Bauhaus as a foundation course should be able to open up things to you further, but it does the other way around. So, and that is exactly what has been happening over so many years in all the art schools across India. And I think it's probably happening in art schools all over the world. So, if we really want to look at, because the problem, I mean, the changes that we are seeing, or the borders that are blurring, are also a certain identities that are created by the market. I mean, why we say that design probably becomes more important within a given artwork, or how new languages are emerging. There is a new identity that the market wants to form. It's trying to understand that what are the new parking spaces which it can look at. And that allows, so this is a different kind of a pedagogy, that the pedagogy which is building from the outside and not from the inside. So if we start looking at the pedagogy that is within the academical structure and how that can be reinvented in a certain way, where it stands against the market forces, which it doesn't allow it to overpower it in its growth. Maybe that would be interesting prospects.
But when I was in London for the London Free Art Fair just a few weeks ago, I was so happy to see so many young people. You know what I mean? Of course, they have to learn how to look at art. They have to learn to understand art. I mean, when you go once to a cricket game, you also don't understand it if you don't know the rules, yeah? Or if you watch soccer and you see just people playing on it, you don't understand the soccer world, yeah? So we have to give also people a chance to understand it. And it's what was so refreshing to so many young people, yeah? Families and children with kids, and I think it has the goal is there, Art is possible now to buy. It's not only the high-end market prices, they are there, and this is the only message which comes, Van Gogh for millions, and this for millions, and Damien Hirst for millions, but it's a wide market now, and it's globalized, and it's a wide artist production, and I think it's very good because it's a sign for freedom also, and people have access, and people can just also go. I mean, I remember times also when museums and art first were a closed shop, and people were too afraid to go, and were too afraid to ask questions, and were also too afraid to buy a painting or an object or for one's housing. And I think it's one should see it also in a very positive sense, that it's possible, and that people undergo all this work and spend money for museums, for art, to give artists a chance to survive, and. And I still have this book here on me with Homi Bhabha, there were these few ideas of, for example, the Bauhaus. You mentioned the Bauhaus idea, yeah? This was one of the first chances to make it possible that people come together, have heavy discussions under the, Klee, Kandinsky, they all had very big discussions. Walter Gropius, he had different ideas from the other professors at the Bauhaus in Dessau. So, and the Bauhaus unfortunately had to move because of the Nazi regime to Berlin and then to Chicago. Yeah, and still these ideas are going on, and you see it especially in architecture, and you see it also now with young designers or with artists also in our show, like Bettina Alamoda. She will come here and discuss it. She's doing much research on the Bauhaus, especially on the 20s. So I think it's a very important situation, and we have to be very aware what's going on, and artists especially have been very aware how to deal with it and to be very careful, because now we have the situation that many people are interested in art and in artists and look at art and also spend money on this. That we try to have a high quality, and that it goes still into depth, and it goes also into a social and political thinking. And this is why I'm very keen also of what will happen next year, actually in Germany, and not in Germany but also in Greece, because the Documenta will take place in Kassel and Essen. So this will be probably a challenge, what will going on. You will be taken also part of the, not of the Documenta, but you are invited from the church, no? In the project in Kassel, so we will see each other again there, yes. So it's a good spirit at the moment, yeah, but one has to be very careful at the same time. Yeah, and I think this situation is now new, and it's unique, because this was not like this before. Yeah, this was not so open that the eastern and the western part and the whole world meet up, not only in Kassel but in general, yeah, at all these situations. And so I think the next year will be also challenging year, the 2017, yeah. So, and come over to Europe if it's possible, yeah, not all Shilpa Gupta.
If you have questions from the audience.
A couple of times in your sentence called middle class.
Yeah.
I don't know what class you're from, whether the upper class or a lower class or a middle class, but it's very important to actually look at the middle class as a very important part of art, design,
sure,
and using the open space.
Sure.
The middle class are the ones who made the art, and like what you say, the upper class bought the art. They never knew what was the term art, but the middle class made the art, and the upper class said, hey, I want to have that. The middle class made designs, I'm talking about India, not about the West, had stainless steel as a main design in India. They bought that stainless steel and put it up, and they said, hey, this is art. They brought it up. The spaces, if you go around in Bombay, you go around the Gateway of India, you go around the Nariman Point, you go around Bandra, Juhu, it's used by the middle class.
Sure.
The upper class hides himself. A very good example I'll give you is if you go tomorrow, all you people there, you should go down to the Bombay gym, walk across the Cross Maidan to the other side, Azad Maidan to the other side. You'll see the Bombay gym, and then you'll see the grass, the green grass, where like he said, the middle class, they sit there. They have a good time, they play with their kids, they eat, they drink. The higher class, as he mentioned, is hidden inside. They don't come out. So don't you think that the middle class contribution to art, design, open space is more than the upper class?
I have to confess that the word was used in a more sort of it's a handle rather than a very sort of a sharply defined category. If one has to use it in a, I think you have to sort of either economically or sociologically define it much sharper. But I think obviously because the conversation was not focusing on that, we used it more as an easy handle to aid the conversation. Yeah. But I don't know if we can do that classification, but it's a worth it question to look at for sure.
We're still looking at class, You're still trying to tell me, hey, look, I'm a better person to be in this class, and well, you are not a better person to be in that class. But my contribution, no, this is about the middle class. My contribution, like the middle class, I'm talking about the term middle class contribution is more. I mean, they have to be respected more.
Sure.
You know,
no, everybody should be respected.
Yes,
Why only
but
the middle
I mean,
class?
it has to be respected in the term of art and design and space.
Sure,
that we are speaking about this important
No, I think
factor.
partly what she said, and I think it's also something that we observe, something as simple with the Art Night Thursdays, the sort of audiences that we are sort of seeing, not only visiting galleries, but also engaging either with conversations, lectures, or looking at works of art. It has really opened up, sort of just that simple gesture of the Art Night Thursday has really opened up in the range of interconnections between people who are talking about art or accessing design, for sure.
Yeah, also when we look at art, Indian art history is very rich. You know, they had built the great temples or the Khajuraho and all of these things. But that freedom of expression was stopped when the Raj came down to this country.
No, that is not
No, I'm saying, but you have to understand, like he was speaking about education, right? So that education has not been passed on.
Okay, so we'll end this conversation here, but there were guilds that were functioning. It was not that easy to say that it's expression and it stops with the Raj. There are histories which sort of move, and there is a structure to art history in India as well, and things have happened and things have changed, and things happen and things change at all points in time, and temples were not always flourishes of expression or creativity. They are strong, beautiful structures, great things to be read into them. But there are equally different and great things happening through the 19th century also. Economic conditions, political conditions change the way art and architecture is produced. At this point, we shall end this conversation and the mic will move to somebody else. Thank you very much. Is there a question? Shreyas, you wanted to add or to something that she was saying? You had the mic in your hand. So if you don't have another audience question, we can.
Yeah, I just want to give another comment. I think you're very right, because this is just what I wanted to point out from my experience of the art fair in London, what I saw. You need the upper class. I mean, in Germany, we don't have these sayings so much, but you need it because, as I just said, in museums, in galleries, in artists, in making books, in making films, you need to spend money. And you need people who are just fond also of artistic and creative ideas. And you need people who support this creativity. Otherwise, because mostly artists are not coming from always rich families, or they don't have this background to travel around the world. They need a scholarship. At my museum, we give scholarships to artists so they can live 2 years without thinking of how do I finance my rent, where does the money for my rent is coming from for my studio, so to work